My name is Katherine Bitner. I write romance, contemporary romance, but my third book was an emotional suspense, a drama mystery. And so right now I am a romance writer, but I can see myself branching into many different genres because I kind of love all genres. So I have 4 books out right now, and I am working on my 5th book.
My name is Casey, and I'm the host of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. I am so excited to sit down today and have a great conversation with Katherine Bitner, author of Unravel Me, Strayed, Time to Bloom, and The Way You See Me. Katherine writes beautiful, cinematic books that instantly transport you to the small towns of North Carolina where her stories take place. I first came across Katherine's work on TikTok. I immediately purchased her book, Unravel Me, and I devoured it. I read this book in one day. Now, aside from the beautiful story, the engaging characters, and the swoony small-town romance plot, one of the things that I noticed about Katherine's writing was that it just had so much imagery. Every chapter felt like a beautifully orchestrated scene with a color palette and a soundtrack to match. Her words have so much texture that you want to immerse yourself in the story. So I immediately went to Pinterest, created a Pinterest board, and started building out all of the scenes she had included in the book. It was just really organic for me. And that turned out to be my very first video on the Love Letters and Books social media accounts. Now we'll definitely explore the plot and the characters of Unravel Me because I love that book and I want everyone listening to pick it up. But before we do that, I'd love to open this episode with a discussion about your writing style. So does everyone mention how cinematic your books are? Does everyone think you should turn your book into a movie? Is that intentional, or am I completely taking you by surprise?
Yeah, thank you. First, that is just really cool to hear from someone who's read it because that is my main goal when I'm writing. I want people to feel so immersed. I started as an interior designer, so creating experiences and atmospheric experiences in person was what led me to interior design when I was younger. And so when I branched into writing, I wanted my readers to feel like they were in that room with the characters. Like if someone was baking cookies, they could smell it and they could feel it. And especially being in the South where I live, there's just such a feeling that I try to convey in my books. There's the weather, there's the accents, there's just, for lack of a better word, there's just a vibe. And so I really think it's important for books, for me personally, to have that cinematic feeling. And then on a much kind of more selfish reason, it's my biggest dream and wildest dream to have one of my books made into a movie or a show. So I'm like, if I can just make it easier for someone to visualize, this is my little manifestation that it could be made someday.
I love that. It makes me feel like I got it because it really did stand out. And it's so funny that you mentioned that if someone was baking, if they're cooking, you felt like you were in the kitchen with them and you
Yeah.
wanted to be there. And there were so many beautiful moments in that book that you could just imagine and place yourself there. Well, now you know your video was what started my TikTok. I was like, sure,
That is so cool.
maybe make a video for this book, this writer I just discovered, and I was so excited about it. So let's actually explore that book, Unravel Me. Can you tell us what is the plot? Tell us about your characters.
Unravel Me is a small town romance. It's my first small town romance I ever wrote or ever thought about writing. It follows 2 characters who are from opposite worlds. You have Audrey, who is like the old money rich girl who has always been led by powerful men in her life, telling her what to do, and has never really had the chance to decide for herself. And then you have Rhett, who is her counterpart, and he had a little bit of a rougher upbringing, but he's very simple and kind-hearted and just a straight shooter. And so the two of them meet, and it's kind of the invisible string theory where they keep getting pulled back to each other in ways that are a little bit unexpected. And without giving much away, he becomes her summer fling. And it's really a novel where you don't just see him saving her, but you see her growing and finding her voice as a young woman, which is such an important theme to me. And I think their love is very wholesome, and it just is like a feel-good summary romance. And after I wrote my previous novel, which was a much heavier mystery, I wanted something kind of light, bring people out of a reading slump or get people back in love with romance.
Well, I adored the story, and I do love that you're pointing out it's not just that one person saves another person. There was growth. And it was really interesting to see, and I'm not going to give anything away here, but how your main character responded to consistency and acts of service and all of these beautiful things that we say that we want and we love. But when we've had the opposite, we really feel challenged to receive it. It almost makes us feel a little
Right.
nervous of like, oh, what's happening here? Do I have to be looking over my shoulder? Like, why are you being so nice? Why are you being so consistent? Why are you being so generous? And it's like, oh, we also have to prepare ourselves to receive that sometimes.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think one of the things that I really was drawn to when writing the story, one of my biggest inspirations was kind of that opposites and just where she is looking for someone who fulfills her, but she's not sure how. Society puts a lot of pressure on people to live a certain way, or your upbringing teaches you should be with a certain type of person. And I really wanted a love story that explored if the main character, if the female Audrey, just kind of got rid of those constructs and dove into just following her heart and how that would feel. And I can't give it away, but you'll see in the novel that it is really unexpected for her and it's really challenging, but it's just a beautiful love story of two people who kind of would have never met naturally. But I feel like fate brought them together.
I also love that you're tapping into this idea that maybe we don't know the final chapter of our story. Maybe we have no idea what we're meant to do, where we're supposed to be, where our talents lie, where our gifts are. And it's so interesting when we shake things up and get ourselves out of that routine or that structure that we think we should be in, and all of these other things are revealed to us, all of our capacities, all of our interests, all the things that we naturally gravitate towards. And we have to realize, like, oh, maybe I've been keeping myself away from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's an amazing theme. That's something I kind of love following in my own life. And so it was really cool to be able to put that as well into one of my stories.
So, for readers who loved Unravel Me, much like myself, what's next? Because I felt like we closed that book and immediately we were interested in side characters. We loved the universe you dropped us in. We never wanted to leave. So, what comes next for us?
So, Unravel Me is the first of a three-part series. It's called the Hometown series, and it's an interconnected world, but each book can be read as a standalone because I really wanted whoever found my book at whatever point, if they connected with one of the characters, they could just jump in and not feel like they have to read the whole series. And so the next book is Penny's story, which is Audrey's best friend and one of the biggest side characters in Unravel Me. And a lot of people fell in love with her as I did while writing it. The title of Penny's story is called Lucky Penny, and it picks up about a year after Unravel Me. Penny is the ride or die best friend who's like always there to pick you up, but she's also a workaholic and she's a bit guarded and on the run from her past. And it's a past she hasn't really shared a lot of, and not even with Audrey. So in Lucky Penny, we go to Penny's hometown where she has to confront her past, namely her high school sweetheart with whom she had a falling out with and never really had the closure she deserved. And this book really explores finding your voice as most of my books explore, but it's also a very strong theme of healing and forgiving yourself with a lot of ties to found family and family trauma. But it's also a very spicy book. It's the spiciest book I've written. And so I think readers, they've been asking for that. So they're finally getting it. But I'm really, really excited. And I actually am going to be finishing the first draft of that book tomorrow. I have one chapter left to write.
That is so exciting. Well, number one, thank you for sharing all of the tidbits and sort of the behind the scenes things that are going on with this book. I'm so excited. I love Penny's character. That theme that you're sharing really resonates with me. I feel like you respect your characters and you give them a very well rounded journey. And it's something that's so relatable to us, that finding your voice, and it's a process. So it's not something that happens overnight. It happens throughout our lifespan. And I love that we get to dive into this world and see that happen for these people. So let's talk about writing spice. What
Okay.
is that like? Because that has to be almost such a strange position to be in, to have someone say, "Oh, we want more of that. You're great at writing that." What is that like
Yeah.
for you?
Oh, it is such it's such a complicated journey. My first 3 books were very closed door. There was nothing spicy about them, and not because I didn't enjoy reading it. I did not know how to really write spice. It is much harder, I think, than a lot of people realize because it can get very cringy and uncomfortable very fast. And so I have a lot of respect for authors who have written those kind of romances. It's not an easy task, but these characters, I think it just really felt like in their love stories, they needed more of that. And so when I wrote Unravel Me, I really wanted you to see the intimate parts of Audrey and Rhett's relationship. I thought that was just very important for kind of her healing and her moving on. And so this series kind of just lended to that. And I will say, at first, a huge thing that held me back was knowing that my family was reading these books. And that really made me nervous, but then I kinda had to get over that and realize this is my writing career, and I have to do what I want, and I have, and I've gotten really great feedback. My family apparently loves spice.
Exciting next holiday dinner discussions. No, in my very own way, I resonate because I've had my mental health podcast for many years now, and I share in a general way, but very openly because it's not the first time I'm sharing about certain topics. I've done that my entire career. And then randomly, someone from high school will listen to an episode and reach
Oh,
out
wow.
to me and write me an email about they had no idea that I had experienced something or gone through something. And you're just like, I'm gonna move through that. This is okay.
Yes.
I'm contributing to the collective. I'm contributing to women's voices by speaking openly and honestly about things, but there's always that moment where you're like, so I can
Yeah.
only imagine when someone's reading your creative writing that you're so excited, but I love that you're sharing kind of moving past that in service to your characters and in service to their stories and in service to kind of bringing the readers into those moments where they are connecting, and it is indicative of the safety in their relationship.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, it really just felt like the natural progression in my writing. So, I think with each book, I've gotten a little bit more comfortable, and it just organically evolved that way. Now I'm fully embracing it.
Lean into it. Well, I think
Yeah.
we're all excited about the next books in this series. I know I can't wait for them. I'm so excited to hear you say that you're kind of wrapping up and you have one more chapter
Yeah.
left. That's really, really exciting. But let's talk about the genre in general, because there's so much discussion on social media, in the media in general, just being so dismissive of romance. And you and I talked about this briefly on our previous call, where I just thought, why are we being dismissive of this thing that contributes so much, contributing to
Yeah.
people's growth stories, people's relationships, checking in with their own emotions and their own wants, needs, interests, and intimacy, all of these things. What comes up for you as an author when people can be dismissive of the genre?
I have found, unfortunately, there's a lot of people who are very dismissive of it when they find out that I'm a romance author. They get very excited when they find out I'm an author, and then it's kind of "Oh, you write romance," as if it's a whole other thing, and from a statistical standpoint, I always kind of just laugh to myself because it is the largest genre, and the romance novel industry generates, like, over $1 billion a year. And so, to me, it's so dismissive, it's a little bit ignorant when people don't realize that, I think. And I also was in that same mindset where before I ever started writing romance books, I had tried writing books for a very long time, and I kept dismissing myself because I believed if it wasn't something groundbreaking and almost academic or just a literary masterpiece, then it was not worth putting out there. And I realized how silly that really was. I think the turning point for me was when I got a Kindle, and I hadn't read anything outside of self-help for probably 5 years. And my husband bought me a Kindle, and I started downloading romance books and reading them and being like, these are incredible. They were helping me move through trauma. And there was just so much representation for wherever you are in life, there's a romance book for that. And I realized it was a genre I was sleeping on, and I really fell back in love with it. It helped me get back into reading and writing, and I've heard a lot of other people say that as well, that it brought them back into loving reading and wanting to write. And so I think it's a really powerful thing. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's about love. Stories are all about love. So it's how can you bash that?
I love that you're talking about this because, as someone who comes from a clinical background, I think people always assume that I got the most benefit out of clinical sessions and those self help books. And I have to tell you, I'm not dismissing them. Those are very powerful and they're incredible tools. In my
Yeah.
own journey, I will tell you, fiction was the number one thing that helped me process things that had happened in life, emotions, getting in touch with them, becoming more emotionally intelligent and aware, processing trauma, figuring out what I wanted in relationships. It's not that these are scripts, but it helps you tap into that part of yourself and say, is that what I want? Is that what I like? Do I put myself in that person's shoes? I think there was so much even about Audrey's journey that I love, that she was realizing, oh, I want a very different life. And now I have to
Yeah.
come to terms with that. And I have to kind of change all of these things, but it's so worth it. And if you've never heard that story or you've never had that modeled for you, how powerful is that when you pick up a book and it's just you and the book and the author's words and vision, and you get to kind of just tap in and say, what would that feel like if I did that for myself? I feel like that's the power
Yeah.
of fiction, right? And it's the power of this genre where I don't know. I think about the amount of labor that is placed on women, and it can be so harsh sometimes. And it's like, oh no, a place to be soft and figure out, hey, do I like this? Do I want this? And it's for no
Yeah.
one else, it's just for me. So I just love what you shared about that. And thank you for sharing so honestly about what it's like being a writer and having that click of dismissal almost when someone says, oh, it's that. It's like, romance and relationships are such a huge part of our lives. They're
Yes.
huge. Think about what's most important to you. It's probably the people you care about the most. So I love that we're just like, oh no, you're born and you're going to figure it all out. We don't have to share stories. The oldest way of learning. We don't have to share
Yeah.
stories or talk about this. Let's talk about more of the things that you're doing because I obviously follow you on social media. So I'm always seeing the things that you share and post. Talk to me about book clubs because I've seen you
Yeah.
post about that so much. It was on your website. What's going on with you in book clubs?
That is like a relatively new venture for me. I think as a self-published author, you always have to be one step ahead with marketing and figuring out where your readers are and just looking at your business from different angles. And personally, I am someone who I love going to events. I love talking to readers and getting my books into hands of people who might not have discovered it. So I started reaching out to book clubs this year, especially after Unravel Me launched, just to try to branch into new groups because it's a book I think that lends to a really good discussion. And I hadn't written something like that before that was something that you could discuss as a group. And so I randomly just threw it out there on Threads one day, which is a new platform to me as well. And it got a lot of interest. And I ended up sending my book, I think, to upwards of 20 different book clubs, which was incredible. And one of them was a local one that brought me in, and I was able to have a discussion with them. And I got so much out of that as an author and just sitting there with women who related to my story or had really good feedback to me. They were so kind to me as an author. And I just want to foster a community of people who read my book because sometimes I'm just shouting into the void of the internet and being like, here, read this romance, but there's something different that happens when you're with people or you're at a book signing and you're talking to someone. It's just that connection that I really want to grow as I guess as this business of mine grows.
Well, I love that. And I think that's so brave just on my end
Thank you.
to walk into a book club and hear direct feedback. So that is amazing to me. One of the other things that really stands out about you is you seem so generous in the resources that you share for authors. I see you posting about it all the time. I know it's on your website. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I started self-publishing, I took about 6 months to research the heck out of how to do it. I watched hours and hours of YouTube. I DM'd every author that I could find and just asked them questions. I wanted to learn everything, and I put it in a huge, like, master document, and I felt like I was studying for college, and then I felt like I had figured a lot out, and I saw a lot of my peers struggling with different aspects that I now understood, and I just wanted to help people because it's a very complicated process to self-publish. So now I have a few pages on my website dedicated to all the information that I have learned. And of course, I'm still a novice at this. I'm only 3 years in. But if I can help someone who is struggling, or maybe they found a spot that was so hard they would just want to give up, and they find me and they're able to move past that, that is all I want. I really want this world to just be full of more people who tell their stories. And so in the past year, I've done one-on-one calls with authors for strategy. And I think sometimes you just need to talk to someone and get some like honest answers from someone who has been there and not always an expert, someone who's still figuring it out. Because I can tell you, I will be 100% honest when people ask how hard it is. But I think it's just important to be transparent.
And I think that's so powerful and brave. And we do that when we see the person next to us do that. It's almost this lesson that gets ingrained in us of, oh, she did that. I can do that too. Whatever I have to teach, whatever I have to share, I can do that for someone. So I think it's
Yeah.
really powerful when we do that, right? Like, I
Yeah.
am all for women taking up more space. It's actually the number one thing I say to one of my colleagues every time she's about to go into a meeting. I'm like, just take up more space. Like, we
Yeah.
want to hear from you. I love everything you share. So I love that you're doing that. I think it is something that any new author, I mean, to have that access, to have someone kind of opening the door for you a little bit and being very honest about what worked or what didn't, that's really powerful. And so thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, all right. We have to have a talk about your favorite books, your favorite
Okay.
content creators, your favorite music, what's inspiring you. Just open the door. Tell me what are the books that you're reading? What are the books that you would recommend to people?
Okay. So this is one of the hardest questions for me to answer. I do not have a singular favorite author because I constantly am reading different books, especially because a lot of my friends are also authors. So the minute their book comes out, I am reading that. And there are so many amazing self-published books that I have read in the past 3 years that I tell people about and they don't know about, which is very exciting. I feel like I'm making like a groundbreaking statement. But
Right.
one of my favorite books, actually, it's called Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blau. It is like a historical fiction romancy book. I read it 2 years ago and I still think about it all the time. I am also a huge Elizabeth Gilbert fan. So she writes fiction and nonfiction. She wrote a book called Big Magic, which helps creatives get over their fear of writing. And I reread that almost every time I start writing a book because I it's just so inspiring to me. Eat, Pray, Love was a book I stole from my mom in high school that I absolutely loved. And for romance, some self-published authors I love are Carrie and Cole, Kelsey Kinsley, and I just finished reading, actually last night, I just finished reading The Silent Patient, which is a thriller. I could go on and on about this topic, but I will read anything. I do not have one love, one genre. I am like, if you tell me that book was good, I'm going to try it.
That's me too. I dive in and it's so funny because I make all the videos on TikTok and Instagram. So people will send me things like, well, I don't know if you'll like this, but I'm like, I will read everything. The
Yeah.
things I do for work all day are so dry. I'm so excited. Tell me a story at the end of the
Yeah.
day. But one thing I wanted to ask you, have you ever listened to the Big Magic podcast that Elizabeth Gilbert did?
No, I did not
I'm
know she
about
had
to
that.
blow your mind. She did a podcast where she was the host and she interviewed all of these people, and it's still up. You should definitely listen
Oh,
to it. I think
wow.
I just gave you a
Okay.
gift for the next
Yes.
week. Yeah, when was it? Maybe it was a long time ago because I was living in a different part of LA, and I remember just that was my daily walk podcast. I would listen to that
Oh,
all the
so
time,
cool.
and yeah, one of the biggest messages that I got from her podcast, obviously similar to the book, is that it doesn't have to be perfect. And this
Yes.
mythology of perfection that really holds us back and prevents us from putting our voice out there and taking the first step sometimes, right? Like we don't even get
Yeah.
started because there's this belief that it has to be perfect right out of the gate. Your first book has to be perfect. And it's like, no, I think that it's brave and it's important for us to show up flawed and to learn from that, to take from that and to kind of lean into that. And it's easy to say on a podcast, you know, it is not easy to do in real life. So
Yeah.
I am very aware of that for anyone who would like to critique me. I know that I'm saying that, but I think it's that podcast and her message, believe it or not, which inspired me to start my mental health podcast because it was just the middle of COVID. I had never worked in audio before. I'd obviously been a therapist for a long time and run groups and was like, I talk all the time. Why aren't I not talking into a microphone and sharing it with other people? And I
Yeah.
remember one of her episodes, and I can't remember who the guest was, but it was really that message of just get started. It does not have to be, and you have no idea how your imperfect message might perfectly impact someone else.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we think someone only wants to hear from us if we're flawless. I'm like, I don't know. Think about the things you and I resonate with. I don't need perfection. I kind of just need people to show up and do their thing, right?
No, that I 100% agree. I'm very excited. I'm about to binge listen to this today, but I agree 100%. I wrote actually just a few weeks ago, I have a Substack about how if I had waited for the perfect book, I still would have not published. And
Yeah.
so my debut novel is far from perfect. I would change a million things about it, but it's out there and I leave it out there just because that is my message and I don't want to take it away. I don't want to be hypocritical. Like it's not perfect and it was the start of everything and I have only learned and gotten better from there and I am proud of it solely because I was brave enough to do it.
Oh, I love that. And as a reader, I have to tell you about my tendencies. When I find an author I love, I read every single thing they've ever written. And I actually love that part of it. I love seeing people shift and grow and develop their voice over time. So it's
Yeah,
not this thing of like, oh, it's not the exact same formula. It didn't hit perfectly every time. It's like, no, I love seeing that because it's a reminder to me I'm allowed to do the same thing. I'm allowed to,
absolutely.
right, develop my voice and develop my vision. So, just from my end, I just have to tell you, I'm excited that I get to do a deep
Thanks.
dive and read the first book. No, that's amazing. So, tell me about other things that are inspiring you, whether it's music or creatives. What goes into your books?
So I have mentioned this a few times on my socials, but I am very inspired by music. I would say that is like my absolute biggest inspiration. I can pinpoint a song to like each one of my books where it started. And when I am writing, I create a playlist. So I have a curated playlist. It's normally like around 20 songs long. And it is the only playlist I allow myself to listen to when I'm writing. So for however many months, those songs become ingrained in my brain as I write, and it just helps me get back into that story. And then those playlists usually end up being in the front of my books so that readers can also kind of feel that. That is pretty much the biggest source of inspiration. I'm a huge like music and movies, obviously with like my cinematic style of writing, I would say. I don't follow a ton of big accounts on Instagram. I am very much interested in just the artists who are just starting out. I get so much inspiration from just seeing people be courageous and brave and put themselves out there. Like that keeps me going.
And I have to tell you, those music playlists, they do it for the readers because
I'm so
I
glad.
always listen to them every time I read a book and I do a deep dive every time I kind of fall in love with the characters. So, no, I'm
That's
right there
awesome.
with you. I love that stuff. Talk to me about things that are Lana coded.
So, Lana Del Rey is my absolute favorite artist. She is, I say, the muse of my life. I think everything I have written has been a little bit Lana coded. So, for Unravel Me, I will say her newest album that came out, she has a song called Margaret. And quite literally, the lyrics are like, "He met Margaret on the rooftop and she was wearing white." And you will see in Unravel Me, this was not to copy the song, it was just a subconscious decision because I was listening to that album on repeat, and Rhett meets Audrey on the rooftop and she's wearing white, and it's their moment. And so I think her music is very poetic. A lot of it is a little bit dark. People call it sad girl music. And it's just really beautiful. It all tells a story, and it's very much about women growing or just being messy in parts of their lives and like embracing it. And so that has influenced a ton of my writing. If you read all my books, all the women are very messy and they are very imperfect, and people get mad about it. But
Maybe we get mad because it reminds us of us, right? It's a good
yes,
mirror, right? I always think that
yeah,
when I see so much feedback about certain characters, and I always think, because I'm not very reactionary, but I always think maybe that's bringing something up, you know? Like I was
yeah,
thinking about when I was reading Unravel Me, there were so many moments when I was like, why is she holding back? And I was like, oh, because I do that. Because I'm nervous,
yes,
because I'm worried, because my self editing and that story that I'm telling myself about what I'm supposed to do is like raging in my mind, and that's what's happening with her. And
yeah,
I love that. So when we get to that point where we can see that in someone else and watch them kind of unravel whatever is confusing them or holding them back, like that's so beautiful and powerful. So no,
yeah,
I really relate to that. I love when people see polarizing characters in any book, not even talking about yours. And I just wonder like what part of them is annoying you right. 'Cause I
yes.
wonder, like, what's inspiring you? Well, if you were going to define your current state of life by any Lana
Yeah.
song, what would it be right now?
Oh, wow. That's the hardest question I think anyone's ever asked me. So she has a song. I don't know if this would be current to my life right now, but it's called Tough, and it's with Quavo, and it's a very soft. She's very soft, and then his part is a rap, and it's like a juxtaposition. And I think that feels like my life right now because I'm very much slowing down, getting ready for summer. I absolutely love summer in the Carolinas. It's beautiful out. And then I also am like in this deep hustle mode where I'm just like grinding away and not letting anything get in my path. And so I think that song, I've listened to it probably 30 times this week.
Great. Well, I'll be listening as soon as we sign off and I dive
Okay.
back into my editing work, just so you know that's going to inform my whole day. I love that though, because it's so funny how certain books or music, we just gravitate towards them at different times, right? And you
Yeah.
can like, rediscover a story that you didn't know you loved or it didn't impact you at the time, but now you're like, oh, it's totally perfect. And right now, I think
Yes.
my Lana song is "Let the Light In," the one she did with Father
Oh,
John
yeah.
Misty. I'm just feeling like I'm on the back end of muscling through, and all of a sudden, you just want that exhale and that softness. So
Yes. I love
that's
that.
my Lana song. I love that you and I are giving each other almost homework after we
I
leave here
know.
today. Like, you have to listen to
I
your
know.
podcast, and I have to listen to your song, but
Yes.
I love that. Okay, so for the readers who are maybe listening to this episode or who've loved your book, what is the pacing? What can they expect for Penny's book or any other creative projects you have coming along?
So Penny's book is in the final stages of being written, and I have a publishing hopeful date of the first week of October, which it feels very far away, but it's only a few short months. So I'm very excited for that. And then the third installment of that book will be released in winter, probably February or March of 2026.
So, the title of this podcast is Love Letters and Books. And everyone that I've been inviting, I've been saying, can you write a love letter either to your younger self or to the readers? And I would love to turn this over to you and give you the opportunity to share with us your love letter.
I wrote a love letter to my readers. Dear readers, the most immediate thing on my heart to say is thank you. Thank you for picking up my books. Thank you to those of you who found me when I was just first starting out, who read my debut novel, cheered me on, and believed in me before I fully believed in myself. Thank you for sharing my work with your community, for making me feel like I belonged in this world of authors. Thank you for supporting me, like truly supporting me these last 3 years. You've made it possible for me to live my dream, and the world of Katherine Bitner books simply wouldn't exist without you. Being an author isn't always easy. There are moments of doubt, times when I've questioned every word I've written or felt tempted to hide away from it all. And yet, so often, just when I needed it most, one of your messages would arrive, a kind word, a note saying my book meant something to you, and every time it lifted me up more than you could know. When I'm writing, the story begins as mine, but in the hard moments when motivation is low and writing feels like a mountain, I think of you, my reader. I think of how my story might bring you joy, healing, or even just a few precious moments of escape. And that keeps me going. So, whether you're an OG fan or just finding me now, from the bottom of my heart and between every page we shared, thank you. Here's to many more stories between us.
I absolutely love that. Thank you so much for sharing that love letter. And I just appreciate you spending time with us and kind of bringing us deeper into your world and your process.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been such a joy. I always love just exploring deeper into my books and the whole world of romance. So I really appreciate that.
And I know I'm following along with you on Instagram and TikTok. Where can listeners find you? Like, where do you live on the internet? Where would you recommend that they check up on you?
I am on Instagram the most. So it's the Katherine Bitner on Instagram. And I always love receiving DMs from readers or anyone who wants to chat writing. So please feel free to message me and follow along for my writing journey there. I am on TikTok as well as Threads, but Instagram is kind of my main community hub.
Oh, I love that you're sharing that because I know people immediately want to find you once they read your book because I know I did.
Thank you.
So there you go. And you have to come back for Penny's book because we want to
I
hear
will.
more about that. Thank you for listening to this episode of Love Letters and Books, a podcast for anyone who loves a good story. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to follow, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite listening platform. You can find me on both Instagram and TikTok at Love Letters and Books. And if you're interested in being a guest on Love Letters and Books, suggesting your favorite author, or just want to write in an original love letter to yourself or someone else to be read on air, please send me an email at lovelettersandmixtapes@gmail.com.